So picture this. You're wandering into a nearly empty late night club.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. The bartender has already heard every song twice, the crowd is super thin, and you are honestly just looking for a dark corner to sit down and decompress.
Yeah, we've all had those nights.
Exactly. But then you tune in to the groove happening on stage, and the rhythm is so tight, so impeccably locked in, it feels like the musicians are literally reading each other's minds.
Well, because they aren't just playing notes in a scenario like that. They're playing the spaces between the notes.
Yeah.
It's this rare kind of musical telepathy that you just cannot fake. And you definitely can't manufacture it in a computer.
Yeah, and today we're stepping into a completely fascinating, fully realized musical universe to explore exactly how that kind of telepathy is built.
It's such a great topic.
It really is. So, the mission for today's deep dive is to unpack the critically acclaimed debut album After Hours by Midnight Pocket. They're this fictional six-piece soul and R&B band created by the enigmatic producer known as the Shadow 007. We're going to explore how the album was received by critics, and most importantly, we're looking really closely at the unique, honestly, highly unconventional relationship between this band and their mentor.
Because Midnight Pocket is not your typical pop construction, which makes this such a rich case study. Their sound is officially described in their press kit as after dark soul with a deep pocket.
Which is a great phrase.
Yeah, and if you look at the genre tags, you see this blend of jazz funk, neo-soul, and quiet storm.
Wait, let me stop you right there because for those of us who don't spend our weekends, crate digging in vintage record stores, what exactly does Quiet Storm sound like?
Right, fair question.
Yeah.
Think of late-night sultry R&B radio programming from like the late 70s and 80s. Artists like Smokey Robinson or Sod.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know that vibe.
Yeah, it's characterized by slow tempos, really relaxed rhythms, and a very intimate, romantic atmosphere. It isn't music designed to make you sweat on a dance floor. It's music designed for 2 a.m. reflection.
That makes sense.
So when you combine that with jazz funk and neo-soul, you get a band that is technically proficient, but just incredibly smooth. But the real story here is how a visionary producer took 6 immensely talented but initially clashing musicians and taught them how to actually operate as a single entity.
Yeah, because the way they met actually defies how the industry usually works, right? The Shadow 007 discovers them in that exact small club setting we were just visualizing.
Use your chance.
Completely. He didn't even go there to scout new talent. He was there to see a totally different act who ended up canceling. And when Midnight Pocket took the stage, what caught his ear wasn't the lead vocals from frontman Julian Kane. It wasn't the melodies at all. It was the pocket.
The rhythm section. He heard the way the bass and drums were communicating underneath everything else.
Right.
Playing in the pocket basically means playing just slightly behind the beat. It creates this relaxed, elastic tension in the groove. But despite that raw underlying chemistry, the band was actually struggling with a ton of friction.
Which happens a lot with super talented people.
Yeah, exactly. You had 6 veteran musicians on stage. Julian on vocals, Ariel Monroe as co-lead, Marcus Loeb Bennett on bass, Nico Grant on drums, Darius King on guitar, and Simone Vale on keyboards.
That is a stacked lineup.
It is. They all had impressive individual resumes. The problem was that they were playing like they had something to prove. Julian, for instance, had this habit of trying to cram like 12 lyrical ideas into a single 4-minute song.
Oh, man. I can totally picture that dynamic. Everyone is just fighting for the spotlight. So the Shadow 007 goes backstage after their set, and Julian is likely expecting a massive compliment from this legendary producer.
Naturally.
But the Shadow 007 just looks at him and says, and this is so jarring, he says, "Stop trying to sound like somebody."
Yeah, he saw right through it. He saw that they were burying their actual personalities under all this performative complexity. They weren't, telling the truth. They were playing what they assumed a sophisticated audience wanted to hear. It was just an intellectual exercise, not an emotional one.
It really makes me think of a brilliant basketball coach who takes over a team made entirely of all-stars. The coach doesn't need to teach them how to shoot or how to dribble.
Right. They already know how to do that.
Exactly. The coach has to teach them to stop hogging the ball. He has to teach them how to pass, how to space the floor, and how to just let the game come to them naturally. But I do wonder, why is taking things away or stripping down an arrangement so much harder for trained musicians than just adding more layers?
Well, when you're highly skilled, your instinct is always to demonstrate that skill. Adding layers feels like adding value, right?
Yep.
It proves you belong in the room. But the Shadow 007 operated on this philosophy of extreme restraint. He basically acted as the seventh chair in the room.
The seventh chair. I love that.
Yeah, he brought them into his studio, removed the club audience, turned off the stage lights, and simply recorded them playing their live set. And when they listened back, he told them the problem was that there was nothing technically wrong.
Wait, nothing technically wrong was the problem.
Exactly. He said the performance was too perfect, and perfection can kill intimacy.
Wow, let's pause there because that is a profound point. We are often conditioned to think that perfect equals good, whether we're talking about art, our careers, or even just how we present ourselves online.
Oh, absolutely.
But you're saying that in music, perfection actually creates a wall between the artist and the audience.
Humans don't connect with perfection. We connect with vulnerability and flaw. Like a perfectly quantized, computer-generated drum beat might make you tap your foot, but it won't make you feel anything deep.
Right, it's sterile.
Exactly. So the Shadow 007 challenged the bassist, Marcus, to radically simplify his playing. In the early sessions, Marcus had written this highly complex 16th note bass line, and the Shadow 007 made him replace it with just 4 sustained notes.
Wait, really? Just 4 notes for the whole section?
Literally just 4 notes.
How does that even work? Like, how does that change the actual feel of the song?
By playing fewer notes, Marcus left these huge gaps of silence in the low end of the mix. Suddenly the song felt heavy. It felt patient, kind of brooding. It forced the listener to lean in and wait for the next note to drop.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and he took a similar approach with Nico, the drummer. He forced Nico to completely ditch the click track.
Okay, for the non-musicians listening with us, a click track is essentially a metronome playing in the drummer's ear to keep the tempo mathematically flawless, right?
Correct. Modern pop music almost exclusively relies on click tracks, so everything lines up perfectly on a digital grid. But by removing it, the tempo of the song was allowed to breathe.
It became human.
Exactly. When the chorus hit, the band naturally sped up just a fraction of a beat because of the adrenaline. When the verse dropped, they pulled back. It gave the music a literal human pulse. And for Julian, the frontman, the directive was to stop writing clever, overly poetic phrases and start writing around singular emotional moments. It was just a masterclass in utilizing negative space.
So this intense mentorship actually led to a record deal through the Shadow 007's own label, which is huge. But Julian was naturally skeptical and asked what the catch was.
And there wasn't one.
Right. The Shadow 007 told him there wasn't a catch, just an expectation that they become better than they were that day. The real currency he offered them was time. There were no demands for manufactured radio hits, no forced image makeovers.
Because he realized that the band itself was the product. He wasn't trying to launch a single standout star or, engineer a viral internet moment. He was cultivating the collective entity of Midnight Pocket. His relentless focus on authentic emotion over individual showmanship became their foundational philosophy.
But if his whole approach was about removing ego and stripping things down, how does that band then turn around and record a highly structured cinematic concept album? Because historically, debut concept albums are kind of the ultimate musical ego trips.
Right. It sounds super contradictory, but the concept actually grew out of that exact stripped-down philosophy. After Hours isn't a bloated rock opera with, cheesy sound effects and spoken word interludes.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, it's a continuous narrative that unfolds in real time. It tracks 2 strangers, voiced by Julian and Ariel, from the initial pull of midnight, through the attraction on a dance floor, the vulnerability when the club empties out, and finally, the first light of morning.
The story of how they landed on that title is incredibly vivid, too. It was a grueling 3 a.m. studio session. Julian is rewriting lyrics in the corner. Ariel is slumped at the piano. The rhythm section is just quietly holding down a groove.
They're all just totally drained.
Yeah, completely exhausted.
Yeah.
And the Shadow 007 looks at his band and says, this record isn't about nighttime. It's about what people become after the world goes quiet.
And Simone Weil, the keyboardist, simply replied, "After Hours." And that single phrase just locked the entire concept into place. They weren't writing songs anymore, they were scoring a specific human experience.
And the track list executes this narrative so beautifully. You start with Midnight is Calling, which acts as a literal invitation.
Yeah.
Musically, it starts really sparse, kind of mimicking the feeling of stepping out onto an empty street. The lyrics talk about streetlights painting the pavement gold.
It sets the mood perfectly.
It really does. And then you move into what the band calls the fire pocket with the track Keep It Coming, Keep It Hot.
Oh, that track brings the undeniable dance floor heat.
Yeah.
The tempo picks up, the bass line gets aggressive, The lyrics are just pure release, like shoes too tight, heart too loose. Every move just tells the truth. It captures that peak moment of a night out when everyone is trying to impress someone else.
But then the back half of the album systematically strips all of that bravado away, eventually leading to the final track, When the Sun Comes Up. It represents the incredibly vulnerable choice of stepping into the morning daylight together without the cover of darkness or, alcohol.
It forces the listener to take the entire journey with them.
Right. Think about your favorite film. You can't just skip to the final scene where the two leads finally kiss. You have to experience the tension of the first act, the misunderstandings, the slow buildup. That context is what makes the payoff work.
Exactly.
But in an era where music is overwhelmingly consumed as bite-sized audio clips for social media or just thrown onto a background playlist while you work, why would a producer push for a rigid, full album narrative arc? I mean, it seems like a massive commercial risk.
Well, the Shadow 007 understood that for Midnight Pocket to stand out in a crowded market, they couldn't just offer isolated vibes.
Vibes are disposable.
Exactly. You listen to them and forget them.
Yeah.
They had to offer a fully realized world. Marcus, the bassist, summarized it perfectly when he said, "The groove is the character, and the story rides inside it." By committing to a rigid narrative, they demand the listener's full attention. They gambled on the idea that people actually still crave deep, immersive experiences over fragmented ones.
Releasing a deeply conceptual, narrative-driven album in a singles-driven market is a huge swing.
Yeah.
So how did the press actually react to this grand experiment? Did critics tear it apart for being too pretentious?
It was the exact opposite, actually. Mara Ellis, the senior music writer at the fictional publication The Night Edit, dropped a massive 9.2 out of 10 score on the album.
A 9.2 for a debut album is almost unheard of in modern music criticism.
Right. Her opening line really set the tone for the entire cultural conversation around the band. She wrote, "After Hours doesn't sound like a collection of songs. It sounds like a night you remember differently every time you tell the story."
That is a phenomenal line. What specifically did she highlight in the music that earned such high praise, though?
She zeroed in on that exact restraint we discussed earlier, calling it the band's secret weapon. For example, she praised Darius King's guitar playing for understanding the value of leaving a hole in the arrangement. He wasn't playing these shredding solos. He was playing subtle rhythmic scratches that supported the vocals. And she also highlighted Simone Veil's use of the Rhodes piano.
Oh, we should probably define that for the listeners as well. A Rhodes is a specific type of vintage electric piano, right?
Yes, so instead of strings, a Rhodes uses tiny metal tines struck by hammers, which gives it this incredibly warm, bell-like, slightly fuzzy tone.
Okay, got it.
Think of the opening chords of classic 1970s Stevie Wonder tracks. Ellis noted that Simone used the Rhodes to add sophisticated jazz-funk harmony without turning the record into a clinical, exhausting jazz exercise. The review essentially validated everything the Shadow 007 was trying to teach them in that windowless studio.
Ellis also placed a heavy emphasis on the sequencing of the tracks, didn't she? She pointed out that Keep It Coming, Keep It Hot could have easily been dismissed as just a generic club banger.
Yeah, out of context it might be.
Right, but because it's strategically placed right in the middle of this real-time story, it acts as a crucial narrative turning point. It serves as the peak of the night's ego, and then the very next track strips all that ego away with the stark vulnerability of stay until the morning.
And that sequencing ensures that by the time you reach the optimism of the final track, the record has actually earned it. It isn't unearned sunshine. It feels like daylight after a long, emotionally taxing night.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though, because Ellis does include a few minor critiques in her review. She mentions that some lyrical ideas lean a bit heavily into familiar adult R&B tropes.
Sure.
And more importantly, she warns that this overarching cinematic concept risks becoming entirely too self-conscious if the band over-explains their lore in future releases. So, does a concept album inherently risk having the story eclipse the actual music? Like, if a listener has to read a Wikipedia page to understand why a groove is good, hasn't the music failed on a fundamental level?
Yeah, that is the perpetual danger of world building in music. It can really easily become an academic exercise rather than a visceral, emotional one. But Ellis ultimately forgives these imperfections because the band commits so fully to the physical reality of the world they're inhabiting.
They sell it well.
Exactly. They aren't selling a fantasy or a fairy tale. They're selling the realistic, grounded stakes of two people navigating a city at night. She concludes that the human stakes of the album are anchored not by the instruments, but by the vocal chemistry between Julian and Ariel.
Which is so fascinating because that vocal chemistry was absolutely not a happy accident. Let's look closely at the vocal center of this band because the dynamic between Julian Kane and Ariel Monroe is the beating heart of After Hours.
Ariel's backstory is crucial here. She had spent years touring as a backing vocalist for other artists, and she was deeply frustrated by constantly disappearing behind frontmen treated as an accessory rather than an artist.
Which is sadly super common in the industry.
Very common. So during the early Midnight Pocket sessions, she still carried that posture. She felt like she was just singing background harmony to Julian.
And the Shadow 0007 steps in with another pivotal intervention. He pulls Ariel aside and tells her to fundamentally change how she views her role. He tells her, don't sing beside him, sing across from him.
I love that direction.
It's so good. He physically changes their setup in the studio, having them stand face to face, looking at each other while recording, rather than standing side by side facing the control room glass.
And elevating her to a true co-lead completely alters their dynamic. It turns their vocal relationship into an equal exchange of power. You can hear this clearly on the track. No need to say a word. The lyrics operate as a direct conversation.
Right, the back and forth lyrics.
Yeah. Maybe I'm moving too slow. Maybe you're moving just right. Kane sings like a man desperately trying not to reveal how much he cares, and Monroe sings like a woman who already knows exactly what he's afraid to say.
The tension it creates is palpable, and naturally that tension spilled over into the press. If you look at the joint interview they did for the Night Edit, the journalist is absolutely obsessed with uncovering whether the two singers are actually a romantic couple in real life.
Of course they are.
Right. But Julian and Ariel intentionally refuse to give a straight answer. When asked directly about their relationship, they reportedly just sit in silence for 3 full seconds. Finally, Julian says, some stories are better when you don't explain everything. They militantly maintain the mystery.
Which is a highly effective psychological tool for engaging an audience.
Think about your favorite television show. You know, the one you binge-watch just hoping 2 characters would finally get together. The tension of those characters circling each other is intoxicating. It's the reason you keep tuning in.
Yeah, the classic will they or won't they.
Exactly. But the moment the writers finally let them get together, the show almost always loses its magic. The mystery is gone, the tension is resolved, and suddenly the dynamic is boring.
And that maps perfectly onto the Shadow 007's core production rule. Give the listener room. Not every question needs an answer. That philosophy applies to the musical arrangements, leaving space between the notes, and it applies directly to the narrative.
It's woven into everything.
Yeah, just look at how the album concludes. There is no tidy Hollywood romantic conclusion. We never find out if Julie and Ariel's characters stay together forever or if they just part ways at the subway station. We only know they decided to face the daylight together in that specific moment. The ambiguity itself is the emotional engine keeping the listener invested.
It is an incredible journey to track. The Shadow 007 wanders into a venue, ignores the melodies, and focuses entirely on the negative space of a struggling rhythm section.
A total shift in perspective.
Yeah. He takes 6 talented musicians, strips away their defensive egos, and teaches them the profound power of silence. He gives them the space to craft a cinematic concept album about the emotional gap between midnight and morning, all anchored by 2 vocalists who learned how to challenge each other on the microphone.
It serves as an absolute masterclass in world building through sound. But if we pull back and look at the bigger picture, it leaves us with something highly provocative to consider. Midnight Pocket is explicitly presented to us as a fictional band. Yet their character histories, their creative frictions in the studio, and their musical philosophies feel incredibly grounded and authentic.
They feel entirely real.
Which begs a difficult question about the actual music we consume today. In a modern music industry where quote-unquote real artists are often heavily manufactured, meticulously focused grouped by record executives, and digitally perfected to the point of absolute sterility, could a beautifully written fictional band actually deliver a more authentic emotional experience than reality?
Oh, that's a wild thought.
If the groove makes you feel something true, if a bass line makes you understand a moment of late-night vulnerability, does it actually matter if the people playing it only exist inside a story?
That is exactly the kind of question that makes you want to put on a pair of good headphones, close your eyes, and just listen to the spaces between the notes. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the meticulously crafted world of Midnight Pocket, After Hours, and the visionary mentorship of the Shadow 007.
It's been a fun one.
Truly. As you go about your day, think about the negative space in your own favorite albums. What are the instruments not playing? What is the singer choosing not to say? Sometimes the most important part of the song is the silence. And the next time you find yourself wandering past a nearly empty late night club, maybe stop and listen for a minute. You never know what kind of pocket might be hiding in the dark.